Life has some breaking news for you. You are a Viking now, you are soaking wet, and the wind is slicing through your tunic like a dull, rusty axe. Hypothermia is already creeping into your fingertips, and without modern Gore-Tex or a heater, your body temperature is dropping faster than a stone in a fjord. There are no chainsaws, no power drills, and the sun is already dipping dangerously close to the horizon, signaling the start of a freezing night. If you don't build a shelter fast, you won't just be uncomfortable. You will be a frozen corpse by morning, preserved in the ice for future archaeologists to find. Good news is the Vikings were absolute professionals at surviving in conditions that would kill a modern human in hours. They didn't just survive. They thrived by building warm, fortress-like homes in record time using nothing but the raw, unforgiving nature around them. Whether they were settling the volcanic rock of Iceland or the frozen tundra of Greenland, they had a blueprint for survival that was fast, efficient, and surprisingly cozy. Today, we are going to teach you exactly how they did it, just in case you ever find yourself stranded in the year 800 AD. But before you start hacking at trees, you need to understand that a Viking house isn't just a pile of wood. It's a machine built to fight the weather. And the first mistake most people make is putting that machine in the wrong place, which is a guaranteed death sentence. The first rule of Viking real estate is location, but this isn't about property value. It is about staying alive when the world wants you dead. You cannot just plop a longhouse in a valley and hope for the best, because gravity dictates that cold air and floodwater will pool at the lowest point, turning your bed into an ice bath. Vikings were strategic geniuses who picked spots at least 1 to 2 meters above the surrounding terrain to ensure drainage. High ground keeps you safe from flash floods and the creeping damp that rots timber from the inside out. But you can't go too high, or the wind will rip your roof off. You need a Goldilocks zone, high enough to stay dry but low enough to use natural windbreaks like dense tree lines or cliff faces. These natural barriers act as a shield, deflecting the brutal Nordic gales that can strip the heat away from a shelter in seconds. You also need to be close to a freshwater source because hauling heavy buckets of water through knee-deep snow burns calories you can't afford to lose. And, of course, you need to be near a forest because dragging massive oak logs across miles of tundra is a great way to die of exhaustion before you even lay the first stone. But there is one more reason Vikings chose their spots carefully, and it has nothing to do with the weather. If you are in raider territory, high ground gives you a tactical advantage against enemies trying to sneak up on you. Once you have the perfect defensive spot, it's time to dig in. Step 2 is laying the foundation, but forget everything you know about cement and concrete mixers. Vikings didn't have Home Depot, so they used a sunken foundation technique that utilized the insulating power of the earth itself to regulate temperature. They would use wooden shovels or iron-tipped spades to carve out trenches about 30 to 50 centimeters deep around the perimeter of the house. This wasn't just to hold the walls. Digging down meant the base of the house was tucked away from the biting wind, using the ground as a natural thermal blanket. Once the trench was dug, they didn't just stick wood into the dirt, because wood touching damp soil equals rot, and a rotting house collapses on your head while you sleep. To prevent this catastrophe, they lined the bottom of the trenches with large flat stones to create a moisture barrier between the earth and the timber walls. For the floor, they often skipped wood entirely and used hardened earth, which sounds miserable until you learn their secret trick. They would throw down a thick layer of dried grass or straw and then compact the soil over it, creating a composite floor that didn't crack and didn't suck the heat out of your feet. With the ground prepared and the moisture barrier in place, you are ready for the heavy lifting. It is time to raise the skeleton of the beast, and this is where Viking engineering gets seriously impressive. Here is where the muscle comes in. Vikings used massive wooden beams, sometimes entire tree trunks, to create the structural ribs of their home. They specifically hunted for the strongest heartwood available, usually slow-growth oak or pine, because a weak beam under the weight of heavy snow means a crushed skull. But they didn't just chop a tree and use it. They knew a chemical secret to make wood last for decades without modern sealants. They would soak the beams in seawater for months, allowing the salt to penetrate the fibers, toughening the wood, and making it naturally resistant to rot and fungus. This strength was non-negotiable because the beams had to support a steep A-frame roof designed to shed heavy snowfall. The angle was calculated precisely so that snow would slide off rather than accumulating and snapping the spine of the house like a twig. To connect these massive timbers without nails, they used complex, interlocking wooden joints and pegs. This joinery allowed the house to flex slightly during high winds, or even mild earth tremors without snapping apart, making the structure incredibly resilient. Now, you have a sturdy skeleton standing against the sky, but it's full of holes and the wind is still killing you. It's time to fill in the gaps with something that sounds disgusting but works like magic. The walls weren't just logs slapped together. That would be too drafty and waste too much timber. Vikings used a composite technique called wattle and daub, which involved weaving a lattice of thin, flexible hazel or willow branches to create a sturdy mesh screen between the main posts. This wattle acted like the rebar in modern concrete, providing a flexible but strong surface area. But a basket wall won't keep the cold out, so they had to plaster it with the daub. Brace yourself because this is where it gets messy. The daub was a sticky mixture of mud, clay, straw, and animal dung. The dung was a crucial ingredient because it contained undigested fibers and enzymes that acted as a binder, making the walls dry extremely hard and durable while providing excellent thermal mass. Vikings weren't squeamish about handling manure because they knew that once it dried, it was odorless, windproof, and tough as nails. These walls could withstand brutal storms and trap heat inside effectively, lasting for years with just a little fresh mud patched in every spring. So you have poop walls that are rock hard and windproof, but you are still looking up at the open sky. The roof is the most critical part of this build, and the Vikings didn't use shingles. They used the ground itself. Let's talk about Viking roofing, because this is where they went full nature mode to survive the sub-zero temperatures. They didn't just lay planks, they created a living ecosystem on top of their house that acted as the ultimate insulator against the Arctic freeze. They started with a layer of wooden boards, but wood rots if it gets wet, so they covered the planks with sheets of waterproof birch bark. The bark acted like modern tar paper, ensuring that melting snow or rain wouldn't drip onto your sleeping face in the middle of the night. On top of the bark, they stacked thick slabs of sod, actual blocks of grass and dirt cut from the earth. This heavy layer of soil provided incredible thermal mass, holding heat during the day and releasing it slowly at night, while the living grass roots knitted the roof together to prevent erosion. A well-made sod roof could last for decades, and it had a tactical benefit too: natural camouflage. From a distance, a Viking house looked like just another grassy hill, making it nearly impossible for rival clans to spot you until it was too late. Now you have a structure that is waterproof, windproof, and invisible. But a cold box is still just a coffin if you don't have a heat source. Let's move inside and make this shelter livable. The heart of the Viking home was the central hearth, an open fire pit that served as the kitchen, the heater, and the light source all in one. Because they didn't have chimneys, they engineered a specific airflow system using a vent hole in the peak of the roof to draw the smoke up and out without sucking all the heat away. Cooking, storytelling, and crafting all happened around this fire, making it the literal and metaphorical center of survival. But sleeping on the floor near the fire was a rookie mistake that could cost you your toes. Vikings understood the physics of heat rising, so they built raised wooden platforms or benches along the walls for sleeping. By elevating their beds off the freezing ground, they positioned themselves in the warmest pocket of air in the room, ensuring they didn't lose precious body heat to the cold earth during sleep. The space underneath the benches wasn't wasted either. It was used for dry storage. Keeping food and supplies high and dry protected them from moisture, mold, and the rodents that inevitably tried to move in during the winter. And just like that, in under 8 hours of grueling labor, you have a fortress that is sturdy, warm, and camouflaged. But what if you are injured, or alone, or you simply don't have 8 hours before the blizzard hits? If you are caught in a sudden storm or hunting trip and need shelter now, the Vikings had a rapid response solution: the turf hut. This was the emergency bunker of the Viking Age, a structure that abandoned timber frames entirely in favor of speed and thermal efficiency. Instead of chopping trees, you would dig directly into a hillside, using the earth itself as your back and side walls. This drastically reduced the amount of building material needed and provided instant, unbeatable insulation from the wind. For the front wall, you would slice thick blocks of turf and stack them like bricks. These sod blocks were heavy and dense, creating a barrier that trapped body heat even better than wood, turning the small space into a survival cocoon. With a simple roof of branches and more turf, you could disappear into the landscape in just a few hours. It wasn't luxurious, but it was invisible to enemies and warm enough to keep you alive through the harshest night. Vikings weren't just warriors, they were survival architects who mastered their environment. They built homes that worked with nature, not against it. But building the house is only step one of Viking survival. Do you think you have what it takes to survive the winter inside one? Hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started uncovering the brutal reality of Viking life.